Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 187. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the first podcast of March 2022. And as I'm sure a lot of you can already tell, I have a sore throat once again. I'm actually losing my voice as we speak. So yeah, I wanted to get this podcast done now because I'm pretty sure if I left it one more day, I wouldn't be able to do it. So if my voice does sound weird or it does sound like I'm straining, please keep in mind I'm not actually like in pain. It's just, I'm in a bit of a tricky situation in terms of what I'm trying to do and trying to rest. And I just want this podcast done. But that is not to say that I'm rushing this podcast, for example. But things over the last couple of weeks have been unfortunate to say the least. I am going to cover a few of those things, and there hasn't really been much to really talk about in terms of media, for example, mainly because of what I'm about to talk about. But in terms of the things that I've been up to over the last 2 weeks, it hasn't really been much, unfortunately. The main thing I did, weirdly enough, was I got back into, collecting for video games and researching video games. I don't know if a lot of you know this, but I do have quite the big collection of physical games. I do pride myself on said collection, and it really is only about physical. I mean, it is a game. I mean, I don't see the point in buying digital for the most part. I actively don't buy games if I can't really get them physical. But I've been doing a lot of research on that. It's taken up a lot of time to kind of get back on scratch with those kinds of things. The main reason I kind of stopped was mainly because of moving house and not really having the time to, really buy games, and obviously worrying about where and what address I'm going to send those to. And just, the whole fact that I didn't really have the space to be buying things and having to place them and then they get lost and that whole kerfuffle. But that's the main thing I've been up to for the most part. It's been fun. It's been actually pretty interesting to be invested and be interested in video games, given how video games are in a tricky situation in terms of what I like and where it's going and what the industry and what other people seem to think and like. But that is a discussion for another time, or with someone else from the podcast crew. But in terms of other things that happened over the last few weeks, I am going to mention this because I think it is very important to mention it, even if it's just for archival sake, and that is the unfortunate conflict that is still going on in Ukraine. It does continue, but as a result of this war, so to speak, and the actions of Russia's leaders, their terrorization of the people in Ukraine, or the country, however you want to refer to it as, Russia, or its people more accurately, are in a very difficult position right now as well, because of recently Western companies are cutting off sales and services to Russia. The likes of people like Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal have all pretty much made it near impossible to actually get their services, and it is a very tricky situation because I understand why they're doing this. No one wants to support Russia, a country that is hurting another country, and by doing this, it's going to hurt their government in some sense. It is a very problematic situation, and I don't know if this is the right thing to do. I mean, I'm not for it, and I'm not necessarily against it, but I mean, self-employed people in Russia may not have a job, let alone an income, because of, Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal just not being a thing right now. The unfortunate situation, once again, is that this is effective in some sense. It should hopefully speed up the process in which we can kind of get out of this awful situation that is now greatly damaging two countries right now. It's really unfortunate to have to speak about this because part of me was hoping that this would be resolved before the next podcast, and I really don't want to make a habit or have a spot reserved to talk about these updates on the podcast. Now, I know I don't have to talk about this, but like I said before, I think it is very important to talk about something as severe as this on a podcast, even if it's, just the mere mention. And I'm not going to go into the politics and the other speculations because a lot of that information, I don't know how true it is. So I don't really want to give you guys too much false information. I'm just going to give you guys what I know and what I've heard. So take whatever I know with a grain of salt, and if I am incorrect on any of my information I provide on this podcast, please let me know. But to kind of switch lanes a little bit, but link it back to what's been happening in regards to this country, we've been having some issues as well. There are food shortages. There's rising prices with said food. Also, taxes and certain other things are going up. So a lot of people are a bit worried, a bit panicky right now. Obviously, there's a little article going around that once again toilet paper is going to be limited or in short supply. So that's probably going to cause panic buying again. I know last year in England, I don't know if it was around the world, there was a petrol shortage which caused people to panic buy once again. People were, lining up at the petrol stations to fill up their gas tank. People were even filling up bottles, and in one video case, someone actually filled up a plastic bag or a bin bag full of petrol, which is the most dangerous and stupidest thing you could ever do, by the way. But yeah, it is a bit interesting as well, because this country, in the event of what's been happening with Ukraine, were actually turning away, Ukrainian refugees, which is awful, because they were doing it because they didn't have visas. They were turning anyone away who didn't have a visa, which, if this country wasn't racist enough, this doesn't help our image for the most part. And they were also telling refugees to get on a train that didn't exist, which is just really cruel and just really weird. Don't lie to people like that, especially in regards to what's happening in the country. And I was really upset and displeased with my government yet again, because they keep failing not only us, but other people, especially anyone who ever asks for help. But yeah, refugees, it's an interesting, not really interesting, it's an awful situation. This country has a really bad relationship when it comes to refugees, because a lot of people do believe that it is the refugees that are destroying the great England. That is not the case in a lot of cases, and in reality, it is a lot of people who have come from outside of England who are the ones who are currently employed and working and possibly happy to be working, while a lot of British-born and British citizens are the ones who are unemployed. And it's usually those unemployed people who are the ones that say the immigrants are ruining the country. That is not the case. If anyone from outside of England didn't know that, that is not the case. Immigrants are awesome people, because unlike some people in this country, they work hard. But besides my little tangent, our government is also going to be asking the public to let Ukrainian refugees live in their house. I don't have a problem with this. Obviously, it's a very, strange suggestion or request, however you want to rephrase it. I know others are going to have an issue with this because, like I said, this country has very racist and prejudiced tendencies towards anyone who doesn't have white skin or isn't British. Because of my work's nature, I cannot. But if things were different, let's say I had a bigger house or I had a different job, I'd welcome in as many people as I could, because that's what you do in these times. That's just what you do. But it will be interesting to see what happens over the next few days if this does happen. In a positive way, I hope this doesn't happen, because I hope the war ends as soon as possible. And if you want my opinion, this war was over the moment it was started. Russia's leader knows this. As much as he won't admit it, he knows the war is over. And people are going to tell him and scream it in his face until they're blue. He's not going to listen, but enough about that cunt. Right now, we need to be positive and we need to be supportive, because things will get better. No matter how bleak it may seem or it's going to get, things will get better. It just will. And you have to keep saying that. If your thoughts are on this current situation, think only positive thoughts. That's my only advice I can give to you right now. But let's move on to some other stuff. And this podcast is going to be pretty much a gaming podcast. Because of my fleeting voice, I've had to cut a few things, but I've decided to prioritize it mainly on video games this time, because realistically last year I didn't really talk about video games at all, but I kind of want to change that, because I think, video games are pretty popular. I think a lot of you probably would like and are following video games, so why not? And the first one I want to talk about is something I really did not expect. A lot of surprises on this episode. I didn't expect another Pokemon game, the 9th mainline series Pokemon game, being Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, were announced, I guess kind of as a late reveal in honor of the 30th anniversary of the Pokemon series. And it is very interesting because in November we had Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which were remakes of Diamond and Pearl that were originally released on the DS. Then 2 months later we had Pokemon Legends Arceus. I can never remember how you say that name. Pokemon Legends, a spin-off game. And now we have a new mainline game, that is most likely going to be releasing at the very end of this year. It is interesting. It's a lot of games, but Nintendo is really celebrating this anniversary with literally something for everyone. I mean, yeah, if you're a Pokemon fan, wherever, I mean, there's something here for you, which is nice to an extent. Now, let's quickly address the Gen 1ers, the people who won't accept anything past the very first games, and just general haters or children, because it's usually just immature children who don't know anything at the end of the day, who are upset about this game. They're claiming that it looks bad, and first of all, this game isn't finished. It clearly isn't finished just from the looks, and they even state in the trailer that it's not final game footage. They have 9 months to make this game look better. If the game somehow looks worse by, let's say, November, sure, the game looks bad. But that's not enough for me to really agree with you on that statement. And secondly, and this is the more important thing, in my opinion, Nintendo/Game Freak prioritizes fun over graphical power. They always have. They've never really put out a game in order to, I guess, be braggadocious and be like, oh, look how realistic it looks, because that's not what video games are, and that's not Nintendo. And I think that's honestly something AAA developers at Sony and Microsoft could learn from, because too many of these developers want the games to look realistic and as cinematic as possible, and then they forget to make the game fun. Hint, hint, Forbidden West. But yeah, with this game in particular, I would love to see them incorporate elements from Legends and Sword and Shield. I don't know what they could be, but it should be interesting. I know they've already said that this game is going to be open world, so I would already say that's a step in the right direction. And I do hope that it is as grand as Legends was, as well as Breath of the Wild, which is, I guess, the new blueprint for how you do open world games. Even the incredibly popular Elden Ring, which everyone is playing right now, is an open world game. I wasn't actually following that game until I actually saw gameplay and saw it, and I was like, oh wow, this game is huge. But yeah, that's the new blueprint. The game itself looks more vibrant than, I would say, some of the previous more 3D and Switch games, which is nice. And I believe it's based around like Spanish culture, which is really nice given the weird live action trailer we got before. It was so epic and bizarre. Even if you're not a fan of like Pokemon, I would say watch that live action section, because it was really well done, but it was really weird. Like, it was actually, I don't know, an actual filmmaker most likely made that, but I give him props for just, that in some sense. And I guess now we can talk about the starters, which obviously are one of the biggest things and one of the first things that Nintendo reveals when it comes to a brand new Pokemon game. And the starters we have are Sprigatito. Sprigatito. I'm going to probably butcher their names. I don't know how exactly you say these names, but yeah, it is a grass cat. We have Fuecoco. I think that's how you say that. Fuecoco. I'm not sure. They look like an apple to me. They're like a red dinosaur dragon apple thing, And we have Quaxley, a duck with hair that looks like a hat, or water more accurately to some extent. And yeah, they're all cute. I love their designs. And I do love the fact that they're all themed around life and growth. So for example, with Sprigatito, I'm just going to call them that, they're a plant that needs water. Quaxley's hair is like a water drop, to grow fruit and vegetables, which is much like Fuecoco. I don't know how you say their names. I'm sorry if I'm butchering them. To the people in the future, I'm sorry. This is not English to me. But yeah, it is interesting. I do hope this game does, not necessarily, I was about to say learn from the mistakes, but I haven't played the newer Pokemon games to know if there's anything in there that I don't like or can be improved on. But I hope that this does become one of the better games in the Pokemon series, because for a franchise to last 30 years, have, 9 main games, and, really, I don't know, not necessarily, and progress slowly, it's time for them to start picking up the ball a little bit and just really going out there, really experimenting. I want to see some just crazy ideas. And given some of the implications in the trailer, like new potential features and items and other elements we've seen, hopefully we do get just something that's just out there, for example. But yeah, that was interesting. The next thing I'm going to talk about, and these technically one of the last things I'm going to talk about, is going to be Sony's State of Play for the 9th of March 2022. I actually watched this 20-minute live stream. I just had the time, I just sat down and watched it. And the first trailer we're going to talk about is Exoprimal, which is a very... this one's really tricky to talk about because it's a very divisive and confusing trailer. Now, obviously I've kind of ruined what I'm about to say anyway, but just go with me on this one. So, you see it takes place in the future, and dinosaurs are raining from portals. Then the Capcom logo appears, and I'm like, this is Dino Crisis. Capcom has stated that there was going to be a Dino Crisis remake or a new game. This is it. Been looking forward to it. Finally, we see this. And then it's revealed as Exoprimal. Not a remake or a sequel. And I'm going to get into my feelings on this as we go on, but I was honestly shocked that it wasn't Dino Crisis. And I think a lot of people were, for many reasons. Like, they might as well have called this Dino Crisis because they're so similar. I mean, there is even a red-haired lady in the trailer who looks exactly like Regina, who was the main character from the first and second games. I'm not sure if he plays her in the second one. She's seen as the main character, if anything. And it honestly makes me think that Capcom must be messing with the fans. Or they've, like, somehow stumbled, or they're, like, not aware of the fans or the fan base. Like, here's the thing, Dino Crisis is not the most popular thing in the world. I get that. And Capcom, might not hold it in as high regards to some extent. I mean, the third Dino Crisis game did not do well. But, yeah, like, I don't know. Have they, like, stumbled on, like, some secret rule that games with dinosaurs must feature a red-haired woman? I don't know. Like, either this was, like, Capcom's attempt to wink at the fans gone horribly wrong, or this is a warm-up to Dino Crisis. I mean, think about it. If an idea as bizarre as mechs fighting dinosaurs does well, which it could do, it has the recognition of Capcom, the people who made Resident Evil, for example, to Capcom, this or that interest in their eyes, it could mean that, they may be looking for I don't know, how do I put it? The interest that this game may have might make Capcom consider doing something with their other dinosaur franchise. Completely stumbling on my words there. And yeah, Dino Crisis is very similar to Resident Evil to some extent, so maybe they wanted to, like, vastly differentiate the two as much as they could, and this was the end result, that they just ended up making a new game because, yeah, once again, they're very similar. But at the same time, my biggest criticism with this game is that it's not original. I mean, it's just Earth Defense Force. If you've never seen that game, go watch the trailer for Exoprimal, then go watch Earth Defense Force. You'll see what I mean. The argument and the frustration of it not being a Dino Crisis game is justified by the fact that a survival sci-fi horror game in the style of the very popular Resident Evil franchise, where you fight dinosaurs in the future, is original, and it would stand out among the more generic games coming out, especially the AAA stuff. It's not hyper-realistic, it's a bit fantasy-esque, it's different. And sure, it's silly, that premise I've just said, but so was Resident Evil Village, and people love that game. I mean, it is a weird situation because on one hand, I'm like, yeah, I want my Dino Crisis, but on the other hand, I'm like, hey, at least Capcom's doing something original. I mean, they have a few original games coming out. There's that one, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one where, like, the astronaut and there's, like, a girl there, and it's like, I don't know, it's weird, that one, and, some other games they have in the work, rumored-wise. But despite my disappointment, the game actually looks like a lot of fun, to be honest. I mean, hordes of dinosaurs running at you is a great concept. I think this game could be a winner to some extent. The only thing that could kill it is if it has a very heavy reliance on online. Now, what was I going to say? Yeah, Capcom has kind of struggled with online games to some extent, especially ones that are more Western appealing. Just look at Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, or the other one they had for the anniversary of Resident Evil, which was abysmal. But it should be interesting to see what happens with this game. I'm gonna keep my eye on it. It doesn't come out till next year, but it looks like a lot of fun. I won't lie. I can't really hate it, but I hope that maybe this actually is Dino Crisis. Maybe this is like a fake trailer or something like that. You know, maybe Capcom will straight up just call it Dino Crisis 4. Who knows? Anything can happen in the next year. But fingers crossed, people get what they want to some extent. Next trailer I want to talk about is for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Cowabunga Collection. Another trailer, and I guess reveal that came out of nowhere. Essentially, they're going to be packaging pretty much almost every game you'd want to play regarding the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Obviously, Turtles in Time is there. The only games that aren't really present there, which is a bit of a shame, would be the Platinum game, the developers Platinum, the game they made for Activision at the time, because Activision held the rights to TMNT. Nickelodeon currently owns the rights to TMNT, and I believe this is their doing, because I did notice that their logo did appear during the trailer. It's just a shame that Konami's name is also attached to this, which I don't really like the idea of giving them money, especially when you look at this at a very cynical standpoint, and it's just them kind of going, here's a collection of games we made back when we gave a shit. But I don't know, we'll see if it's cheap, or maybe I'll get it pre-owned if it bothers me that much. But yeah, I mean, and at the same time, this is going to be a nice, like, accompanying and comparison piece to Shredder's Revenge, which is also another arcade old school beat 'em up that's coming out earlier this year. I don't know what's going on with Nickelodeon, the people who, you know, most famous for SpongeBob, I guess you could say. They're going in really hard with games. They've got quite the budget. Obviously, they had the Super Smash Bros. Type game coming out. They have, I think it's a SpongeBob game coming out as well, which is very interesting because they haven't revealed much about it. And they're just doing a lot of very interesting things with their IPs. It's a shame that other people aren't doing anything. It'd be nice to see more video games based on shows and characters such as Cartoon Network or Adult Swim, or even some like Netflix stuff. I mean, Netflix do hold some level of license over the shows that they put money into. Not necessarily things like anime, because they do not own that. They just license it. But yeah, it should be interesting. It should be very interesting. Next one I want to talk about is a tiny trailer. GigaBash. This is the, I guess, more redefined game coming out this year. This was the Raw reveal trailer, which I loved. It's a really nice touch. Good to see more games in this genre, the whole 4-player multiplayer, you know, monster beat 'em up brawl, very Godzilla-esque inspired, which is just lovely. This game looks great. It looks actually really nice. It looks like a lot of fun, and it's interestingly enough going to be going up against Dawn of the Monsters, which is a game I talked about a little while ago, which is being produced by WayForward. And yeah, it should be interesting to see how these games fare comparatively, who's going to do it better. Hopefully they both do it really well, but yeah, I'm actually really interested for both of those games. Another surprise is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R, the letter R, not me being a pirate. Yeah, this was the only trailer that actually made me gasp, because the trailer starts, and I'm not going to say too much, obviously, because I know some people haven't seen all of JoJo. You see a particular scene, then you see the very iconic, ominous, you know, kanji, and then I'm just like, you know, literally. But I thought it was going to be a brand new game. It's not. It's a re-release of a game that came out on the PS3, but it makes sense. JoJo has grown in popularity since the PS3 game. And obviously, I believe at the time when the game came out, I think only Part 3 existed. And since then, we've had Part 4 and Part 5. And obviously, Part 6 is technically kind of airing right now. It's on Netflix, which I still don't agree with. But yeah, I mean, at least more fans and more people can play this game, because it's literally just on the PS3. My only thing, and my only hope really, is that with R, they add more. Because I own the original, and if it's just a re-release, I'm not going to bother with this. They have to do something more to this game, and my hope and my speculation is that they're going to add characters, or they've been working to add more characters from Part 8, which has recently finished. And given that it's out, and obviously I'd imagine a lot more hardcore fans over in the West and Japanese audiences probably are more familiar with these characters, these abilities and these concepts, so maybe they can add, because without spoiling anything, in All-Star Battle, there is a story mode that kind of goes through a loose retelling of each part's story. And when it gets to part 8, it's very confusing because at the time, part 8 was very new. For example, part 8 took 10 years for, I cannot remember his name, for it to be completed. It took 10 years. So obviously, they've got 7 years worth of material to potentially now work with. But the main, I guess, hint at the idea that this is going to be a little bit more is the fact that this trailer is referred to as first announcement trailer. So hopefully they're going to be, showing off more. They also specified 50 main characters in the game, and I don't recall there being 50 characters in the original game, which is interesting. I don't know if anyone's noted that or whatever, but I don't recall there was a lot of characters. There was maybe coming up to 40 characters. I don't recall there being 50. I know there was DLC characters, but anyway, this is me getting excited. If you couldn't already tell by already, I'm a big JoJo fan, so I was happy to see this, and also just to see Sony just be mad promoting JoJo. Like, yeah, here you go. I will give them props on this. Like, some very low key games they gave attention to. GigaBash. That's something that, not to be mean to developers, I don't think they'd ever get the chance to have that 30 seconds of spotlight. But hey, if Sony wants to try and diverse themselves and, kind of continue this whole idea that, they're for the gamers and that they have the variety, fair dues. I can't critique them on that. And the last trailer I want to talk about is a very quick one. It's going to be for Valkyrie Elysium, another very generic title. Clearly the same guy who named Horizon Zero Dawn also named this game. It's interesting. Interesting game from Square Enix. I really like its open world approach, and it is just, I don't know, there's something about this game, I can't quite put my finger on it, but I just liked it. I just liked what they were doing with this. I like the combat, I like the style, I like the fact we don't know anything about the story. It is clearly a very limited budget or lower budget game, which is perfectly fine. I think more big developers need to make smaller, A or AA games. That's the only way this industry is really going to survive. These companies can't keep putting in millions of dollars and expecting millions to play it. It's just not going to happen. Think about some of the bigger AAA games. They've only sold a few million. There are indie games that have outsold them. There are games that are on Nintendo systems only that have outsold them. I know it's a random example, but as much as people want to bang on about games like The Last of Us 2, The Last of Us 2 was not the best-selling game of that year. Yeah, it sold over 10 million, but if I remember correctly, Animal Crossing sold about 17 million copies, simply because that's what people wanted to play. And I would imagine that made Nintendo a lot of money because they most likely did not put millions into that game. But like I said already in this podcast, the whole issue with the video game industry is something that can be discussed at a later date or with someone else. But that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast. Sorry it was so short, but like I already did say again at the beginning of the podcast, not a lot of people are really releasing like media-based trailers or hyping up their stuff simply because it's a bit odd to be doing that right now. It is a very tricky situation. And one thing I did say to myself on the previous podcast is I have to make sure this podcast is done a little bit better, because I think the last podcast was a little bit rambly. I think it was a little bit too video essay-ish, and I kind of wanted to make something a little bit more stripped back and focused to some extent. For quick reference, the last podcast, I didn't actually write that episode. I typed it, and I didn't enjoy typing. I don't enjoy typing the podcast. I prefer to write them because, they're more a blueprint as opposed to a script. But I guess I will give you guys the video of the episode, which is going to be for, I always struggle how to say their name. It's going to be for Magdalena Bay with Dreamcatching. This artist needs a lot of praise and a lot of attention. I'm still going to promote them. One of my favorite albums of last year. I would highly recommend watching this video. Really trippy and really interesting music video. I can't quite figure out how they did it, But there's another video I might use for the video of the episode next podcast that's very similar. So yeah, we might be going on some weird, psychedelic, weird journey trip for the video of the episodes. I'm doing weird hand motions right now to, thinking you guys can see that. But yeah, if you couldn't tell already, I'm not feeling too well. I have a sore throat. It's late at night. I'm tired. Hopefully I can wake up tomorrow. But enough about me. I guess, given that I'm rambling, I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.